woman who she actually adopted 4 special needs children. Her vision, before they came into this world, they chose her to raise them. It's just a very beautiful vision. And vision, the child is saying, yeah, that's the mother I need. That's the mother who has what I need to do what I need to do in this world. So this is the 4th class in this series, before and after. Now we're already in the after stage. We have a lot more to talk about after than before, obviously. And we were discussing, the last thing we're talking about was the significance of arranging Kaddish. We said when we look at the different things that we do after someone has passed away, we can sort of divide them into 2 categories. The things we do for the mourner and the things we do for the departed, for the soul. We said, for example, Shiva, the whole idea of sitting Shiva, is for the mourner. It's for the mourner's pain, for the mourner's grief, for the mourner's respect for the deceased. And Kaddish is what we need to do for the one who's departed. We explained how important it is. If you know of anyone that's passed away, try to make sure to arrange Kaddish to be said every day, 3 times a day, for 11 months after they pass away, and then every year on the yahrzeit, on the anniversary of the passing, which would imply that anyone you know who passed away 20 years ago or 30 years ago, if you know the English date, we can figure out the Hebrew date of their passing, and every year on the yahrzeit, on the anniversary of the passing, it's very important to make sure that Kaddish is said. Kaddish is very, very critical for the ascension, for the elevation of the soul. Now, why are we arranging this Kaddish for 11 months? When we think of the stages of mourning, we have, as we've explained, until the person is buried. And then we have 7 days of Shiva, which are actually divided into 2 groups. The first 3 days, where it's more intense mourning, and then the next 4, where it's also very intense, but it's already a lesser level than those first 3. So those are the 7 days of Shiva. And then we have from the passing until 30 days. So there's a 30-day mark, which we said for anyone besides a parent, at that point, the official laws of mourning have ceased. And then for a parent, the mourning continues for 12 months, for a year from that time when the person passed away. But the Kaddish is 11 months. And the reason why the Kaddish is 11 months is because we know that for a regular person, meaning a regular person, people are people, and we do some things good, right, and we do some things wrong, and that's, the journey of mankind, the journey of our humanity. But for a regular person, they will finish any type of cleansing they need in less than a year. Within a year, they should be in what we call in Hebrew Gan Eden, the afterlife, the reward, the bliss for the soul as they wait for us to get our act together and bring the redemption. So therefore, we feel that if we would say Kaddish for an entire year, because seemingly we keep all the laws of mourning for a year. Why don't we say Kaddish for a year? We do everything else for a year. But we don't want to imply that, this soul needs a lot of cleansing. This soul, you need 3 times a day, every day for 12 months to help this soul get out of any Gehenna situation. And therefore, because we wouldn't want to make that implication for anyone, and we don't want to start judging this person needs this amount and this person needs this amount, we cut the daily Kaddish at 11 months. And then for every single Jew, it continues every year afterwards on the yahrzeit. Now, when we're talking here, we're talking about, as I'm calling it, a regular person, regular people. Some are better, some are not as good, but there's the broad spectrum of regular people. And then there's some people that unfortunately have a lot worse intensity of the wrong they did. And someone who has a tremendous amount of wrong, such a person, it could take thousands of years for them to be cleansed. So we're saying under a year, we mean in most people, the bulk of people. But if someone has done something horrifically wrong, they don't get into Gehenna. Like Gehenna says, we can't accept. The purpose of Gehenna is to cleanse. If the evil is too intense to be cleansed, well, what can we do with someone like that in Gehenna? What's the point? Gehenna is only for purification. If we can't purify you, we don't want you here. We don't want to keep you in Gehenna for thousands of years. That's not the point. So these souls become what's called in Hebrew a dibuk, a wandering soul, meaning a soul that can't yet enter Gehenna because there's still so much evil. And only after a lot of cleansing can they finally go through the process of getting into Gan Eden. There's a story with Lubavitcher Rebbe with such a soul, such a person, which has a very famous story of what she did wrong that's recorded in the Talmud. This person's name was Miriam, the daughter of Bilga, Miriam Bas Bilga. And she came from a very noble, illustrious priestly family. The priestly families were very illustrious, noble families. And she came from this priestly family. And she lived during the time of when the Assyrian Greeks were controlling Israel. And unfortunately, she left the ways of her forefathers. She left her noble priestly family. And she joined the Assyrian Greeks and their lifestyle. And she became a consort to the Assyrian Greek ruler at the time. And it's recorded in the Talmud that she went with him. She had access. She went to the temple. She went to the temple. She went up to the altar and she spat at the altar. And she said, "Wolf, wolf, how long are you consuming the sacrifices of the Jews and you're doing nothing for them?" Like every day they feed you these animals, 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 and now the Jews are in such a low state and you're not helping them at all. Wolf, wolf. This is recorded in the Talmud. And this is towards the end of a section of Talmud. So therefore, a lot of times when people conclude a Talmud, they focus on the ending. So there's a lot of discussion and commentary and focus and talk about this specific incident and what the Talmud goes on to say, how her whole priestly family was penalized because of the behavior of Miriam, etc. So the Lubavitcher was speaking about this at a Hasidic gathering. And he said, look at this person. She has as we would call it, good Jewish heart. What's bothering her? It's bothering her that the Jewish people are suffering. It's bothering her that the altar consumed all the sacrifices, but now the Jews are in a lowly state and they're not being helped. She cares about fellow Jews. Look at her. This is, in my own words, what the Lubavitcher Rebbe said at this Hasidic gathering. And after the gathering, someone wrote a letter to the Rebbe and complained and said, what are you making this woman out to be such a righteous person? She wasn't. She wasn't. What she did was horrible. She's from a priestly family. She goes and lives with a non-Jew, with the ruler of the Assyrians that were tormenting the Jews, and she walks on the temple ground. She knows the law. She's from a priestly family. She's not allowed to do anything she did, and she spits. She did horrible stuff. What are you making her out to be such a righteous woman here? This was the letter the Rebbe got. And the next gathering, the Rebbe mentioned this, and the Rebbe said, why does it bother you that a soul that's been suffering for thousands of years is finally at peace? Meaning that when the Rebbe said those positive words about her, this soul that since the time of the story of Hanukkah until now couldn't go anywhere, was suffering, was stuck because of the evil she had done. And now with the Rebbe's words, with the Rebbe's, as we call it, in Hebrew you'd say limud zechus, with the Rebbe putting a positive spin on what she did, she was able to enter the next realm, which just I think is of course a very strong example of this concept that yes, of course, for a regular person, less than a year, but sometimes souls have a lot longer based on, if they've done things of really, really damaging evil. What do you take from the Rebbe's intervention with Miriam, the daughter of Bilga? How do you process that for yourself? How do you understand that?
Is it about forgiveness?
Sorry, Ina, did you say something?
Yeah, is it about forgiveness?
Is it about, and then I missed what you said.
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness. I think that's definitely something you could take from there, that the Rebbe is showing us that sometimes we could be judgmental. And there's a virtue in just forgiving. Yes, I definitely see that. Rachel, what were you going to add?
You can always find something good in Jewish soul because it comes from such a place. It's part of the God. So there has to be something good about it.
Right. And maybe we could say the Rebbe is modeling for us how we should look, how we should look, and especially after someone passes away. After someone passes away, people could have hurt you. People could have done things that caused you great pain. But after they pass away, it's a very wonderful, virtuous thing to look at them and try to look at things in a positive light. Like Ina said, forgiveness, or like Rachel said, to find the good in the person. And to forgive, to drop it, to say, I don't want someone to suffer because of me. And I know they can suffer because of me, especially now when they're standing in front of the courts of judgment. And as we explained, it's pure judgment there, no compassion. That's this world. And if they harmed you and they didn't repent, that's a pretty, a pretty big thing on their record. And yeah, forgiveness and looking for the good and compassion and seeing good and saying, I don't want a soul to suffer because of me. Yes, I would definitely say both of what Ina and Rachel is saying, I think is a very, very valuable lesson. Anyone else? Any other thoughts on this?
So I just have a question. I know that person can, how to say, repent. Maybe, I don't know.
Yes, repent.
Repent even till like last minute, like before death. What is the prayer? What is the prayer that you
The
should say?
prayer is called vidoy. Vidoy
Vidoy.
means confession. We say the long vidoy over Yom Kippur 10 times. The first time we say is actually in the afternoon, after the mincha afternoon service, before Yom Kippur. And then there's another unofficial time, so to speak, right when Yom Kippur begins. And when you add those 2 times to the other 8 times it's written in the prayer book, in the special machzor, we say it 10 times. And that's called confession. We also have a smaller confession that
Before
we
we go
say
to
every
sleep.
day. Yes, we say it
Mhm.
after our morning prayers, after the Shemona Esrei, the Amidah of the morning prayers. We say it after the afternoon prayer, after the Amidah, the Shemona Esrei of the afternoon prayer, and we say it before we go to sleep. So 3 times a day, we are going through a smaller confession. And on Yom Kippur, we say a very long one, and it's very special and important if someone is in, a state when they're passing away. Often at that point they can't talk themselves, but that someone says it for them. There was an elderly woman that I was very close to, and we found out she was hospitalized. This was during COVID. She didn't have COVID, but she was an elderly woman, and we were told by her caretaker she was in the hospital. And somehow my husband has like charm or something. We managed to get into the hospital because this was COVID. They weren't letting anyone in. And it was very moving to me. My husband went to her bedside and he just read everything for her. Just a lot. It was actually quite a lot of things that he read that officially we would want to say or to have said for us before we pass away. And that's called the vidoy, the confession. And obviously, many people at that point can't read or don't have, their local prayer book in their hands. But definitely if someone does have this consciousness, it is a sense of asking for forgiveness. Absolutely. Absolutely. Anyone else? Any other thoughts on this? Okay, so I just think what Ina and Rachel said really is very, very poignant in this perspective, especially if someone's passed away. Again, they're standing in judgment. And I know I've had the situation personally where people that have very, very deeply harmed me have passed away. And I've just really felt like, God, I forgive them. Meaning, I don't want someone to suffer because of me. I don't want a soul to suffer because of me, so I forgive them. Okay, something else very important. So we spoke about Kaddish. Something else that we do traditionally is arrange the learning of Mishnah. Mishnah is the first official recording of the oral law. And in the Hebrew, you'll have to take it on faith to trust me, that the letters Mishnah, if you rejumble them, create another Hebrew word, nishama. Mishnah, mem shin nun hey, and nishama nun shin mem hey. It's the same letters reconstructed. Nishama means soul. And we are told that Mishnah and soul, nishama, have the same letters because the learning, the study of Mishnah helps the soul. So therefore, we focus on studying Mishnah to help a soul. It was just on Friday, my father's 30th yahrzeit. And in honor of that, members of the family, children and son and daughter-in-laws and grandchildren, collectively, we studied 30 tractates of Mishnah in honor of the 30 years of my father's anniversary. So the reason I'm saying that is it's not just like right after they pass away. The Mishnah is always very helpful for the soul. A person can learn it themselves, or a person can arrange for other people to learn it. Sometimes people try to get other people to volunteer to learn it. It's very traditional to try for the 30-day mark or for the 12-month mark to complete all the Mishnahs, the entire work of Mishnayos, all of them, to have studied, again, not by one person usually, sometimes, but usually different people take different sections, and to make sure that's studied for the elevation of the soul. So it's not like Kaddish. Kaddish is a prayer. Mishnah is a study of Torah. And of course, there's lots of Torah you could study, and any Torah you study obviously would help. But you want to especially study Mishnah because, again, as we see by the name, Mishnah relates to the soul. For this reason, we're speaking about saying Kaddish 3 times a day for the departed. At the end of the prayers, before the final Kaddish is said, the person saying the Kaddish is supposed to study 2 chapters of Mishnah. Every single prayer, 3 times a day, every day for 11 months before they say that final Kaddish. Now, obviously, on a technical basis, it's a little difficult because what's the congregation supposed to do? Wait until you finish those 2 chapters? So if you're doing it right, not everyone does it right, but if you're doing it right, before the prayers, you study the 2 chapters, and at the end, you just say the last section of each of those 2 chapters. And those 2 chapters specifically relate to purity and impurity that don't have to do with death. But again, the reasoning behind this is because study of Mishnah helps the soul. So the same way we're injuncting 3 times a day all of the Kaddish for the soul, we're building into the system 6 chapters of Mishnah studied every single day, if the person's doing it correctly, for the benefit of the soul. I don't know if anyone here has heard of this or has arranged this after someone they know passed away, but this is definitely something that's very, very beneficial for the soul. Any thoughts on that? Anyone has done or heard of this concept before? Done something like this? Okay. So when the person passes away, as we said, there's the original cleansing, Kabbalistically, one's called chibut hakaver, the beating in the grave, cleansing the body, chibut kaf hakela, the blow of the slingshot, the dusting off of the soul. And then, of course, there's, as we spoke, Gehenim, the cleansing, Gehenim of snow, Gehenim of fire. And there's also the concept of reincarnation. Reincarnation is not only and necessarily to cleanse the soul, but one of the reasons for reincarnation is to cleanse the soul. Meaning, it could also be for other reasons, but this is one of the reasons. And sometimes a soul doesn't go that route of reincarnation. They go through Gehenim, they're cleansed, they go on to Gan Eden. Sometimes they don't go to Gehenim at all. They have reincarnation, and through that they're cleansed, and then pass away and hopefully haven't accrued any problems in this lifetime and go quickly to Gan Eden. And sometimes they have both. They have some types of cleansing in Gehenim, and they also have reincarnation for other cleansings. And sometimes the soul is actually given a choice. What do you prefer? Do you want to go through the cleansing of Gehenim? Do you want to go through the cleansing of reincarnation? So definitely one of the ideas of reincarnation is to cleanse. And reincarnation in general, of course, is a road that many souls go through. Meaning after a person passes away, it's very, very plausible they will come back down for another lifetime. So I'm going to explain briefly why. What are the reasons why souls come down for reincarnation? It's very interesting because sometimes people think like reincarnation, isn't that like Eastern religions or something like that? And no, it's very, very, very Jewish. It's discussed extensively in the Jewish writings, tremendous detail about the concept of reincarnation, which in the Hebrew, if you ever see in the original Hebrew, would be called a Gilgul. Now, the assumption, before I say anything else, is we are all in not our first lifetime. We all are Gilgulim. We all have had many lifetimes. Every single one of us. No question at all. The first leader of Chabad, the Alter Rebbe, who was born in maybe the early 1700s. I'm trying to think of the Hebrew date and quickly translate it into the secular. My brain's not going to do it fast enough, but let's roughly say the early 1700s. And he was a new soul. He was a soul that never came to this world before. And before he was born, the Hasidic leader of the time, who was the Baal Shem Tov, he told his students, he told his followers, his disciples, a new soul is being born. And he had such joy and excitement because in the 1700s, nobody was coming down that was a new soul. So for sure in the 21st century, we know we've all been here many, many, many times. We are all old souls, which has advantages. We're very strong, we're very muscled, we're very old. So why do we keep coming back? Well, for various reasons. One reason is because the world needs your energy. Every person has their own strengths, their own fortes, their own spiritual gifts. And it's possible that the world needs what you specifically, uniquely can do, and therefore your soul has to come back. We are told of great, great holy Jews, what we call tzaddikim, that came back. Well, obviously, they had no blemish on record. They did nothing wrong. They were such godly people. So why are they coming back? We know all, well, you have to make up for this and you didn't do this, but that's not the case. Why are these holy, holy, holy people coming back? Because the world needs them. For example, King David. King David was a Gilgal. He was a reincarnation of our matriarch Rachel. So Rachel, the matriarch, and King David shared the same soul. Adam, first man, he has a very bad rap, but he was probably the second holiest person of all times. He was reincarnated as Jacob, our patriarch Jacob. Again, Adam, Jacob, Rachel, David. We just had a few weeks ago in the Torah portion, we discussed Pinchas. Pinchas, who was such a zealot for God, who risked his life for God. Pinchas came back down as the prophet Elijah. Elijah and Pinchas shared the same soul. Moses, see a lot of great, but they also weren't new souls. Moses was a reincarnation of Noah. Noah, the father of all mankind, Noah in the ark. Noah's soul was a soul of Moses. Moses actually was also, he had more than one energy in him. Moses was also a reincarnation of Hevel. If you remember, biblically, Adam has two sons. In English, you say Cain and Abel. In Hebrew, we say Cain and Hevel. Cain murdered Hevel. Cain murdered Abel. Moses was also from the energy of Abel, of Hevel. That was also in his soul. He was also a reincarnation of Hevel, who was also a very, very pure person. So we see here there actually could be a composite. And we see here again such godly people. The fourth leader of Chabad, before he was the leader of Chabad, when his father was the Rebbe, the leader, his name was the Rebbe Maharash, and he had a young son who was very, very holy, very, very pure. And as a child, he became very ill. And one day he woke up and he told his parents, I'm so happy, dress me in Shabbos clothes today, dress me in my most special clothing, because I'm going back to my grandfather, which the parents knew meant the child was saying he was going to die. And they dressed him as he wanted in Shabbos clothing. And he was lying on a bed and he was surrounded by all of his uncles. The Rebbe at that time, the Tzemach Tzedek, had 7 sons and they were all tzaddikim. They were all very, very holy. So the bed is surrounded by these 7 holy, holy tzaddikim and I assume his mother. And this child was saying words of Torah and passed away. It was a very holy, very pure passing of this very pure child. And of course, after he passed away, his parents were very broken. I mean, you're losing your child. And the Rebbe Maharash's father, who was a Tzemach Tzedek, said to them, you should know your child was a Gilgal. He was a reincarnation of the Alter Rebbe, of the first Rebbe of Chabad, the author of the Tanya that we've studied many, many years ago here in this class. And the Rebbe Maharash said, the world needed his energy again. He had to come back down for a few years. And you were blessed that he chose to come to you. So you should, in other words, you shouldn't have this pain. You should know you merited to have this very, very holy soul. Which again, just brings out this concept that all of these people, now again, you don't have to be a person of this caliber. There could also be people more regular who come back down because the world needs their energy. But the point by mentioning these very holy people is that it's so clear that they did nothing wrong and they were lacking in nothing. And the only reason they're back is because the world needs them. And that's the point that I want to make very clear, that sometimes, again, it doesn't have to be a person on this stature, but sometimes a person comes back because whatever your specific forte, your talent, your gift, your abilities, the world needs that. And since the world needs that, you come back down. Again, as we, of course, said in the beginning of this series, we're all volunteers. We all volunteered for God for this mission. And again, we can volunteer and say, yes, God, you have a need. All right, I did it before and I'll come back down again, because what my soul's specific ability is, that's what the world needs right now. It was the idea of the choosing. Someone was sharing with me, this is not about reincarnation, but just this idea. Sometimes we have children that are more challenging or have certain extra needs. A woman who actually adopted 4 special needs children, her vision, before they came into this world, they chose her to raise them. It's just a very beautiful vision. And vision, the child is saying, yeah, that's the mother I need. That's the mother who has what I need to do what I need to do in this world. Just as I mentioned, classical examples, obviously for regular people, I wouldn't know, but everything I said till now was written. So that's how I know it. Not privy to any extra special secrets, just from what's written. Just as these individuals like Noah came back as Moses, or Abel came back as Moses, or Rachel as David, just as they came back because the world needed that energy, we are also actually told generationally, our entire generation, every Jew living now has been here as a generation 3 times before. So I can't tell you the secrets of all your previous lifetimes because I don't know them. I don't even know my own. But I do know 3 times I was here before, because we were all here before 3 times. What were the 3 times as a generation we were all here? The first time our generation, all of us, were on this world was, sadly to say, we were all part of the building of the Tower of Babylonia. The Babylonian Tower, which was, of course, a grave sin. As a generation, we were all part of it. And then we came back to rectify that, and obviously because we're the souls for that. And we came back to be that final generation in the Egyptian enslavement. The Jews were in Egypt for 210 years, of which they were enslaved for roughly 116 years, of which the last 86 years was the harshest enslavement. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse till the end, the crescendo, the climax. We were the generation that experienced those last years of Egyptian exile and the redemption from Egypt and the desert. So as a generation, we atoned for what we had done wrong with the bricks and mortar in Babylonia through our enslavement and bricks and mortar in Egypt. And as a generation, for the first time ever, we brought redemption. We were the first generation to create redemption. We created the redemption from Egypt. And we're told that imprinted our generation as the people that bring redemption. And that's why we kept coming back after. So the next time we came back as a generation, I'm not talking about any of our personal lifetimes, but as a generation was shortly after the destruction of the Second Temple. It's a very, very, very hard time for the Jewish people, a very hard time. And we were the generation where the great leader was Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, who's buried in Meron, as probably most of you know. And that was a very unique generation where all the secrets of the inner dimension of Torah were revealed to everyone in the generation. Meaning there's the revealed parts of Torah that anyone could, in theory at least, learn. And then there's the secrets. And the secrets, the Kabbalistic secrets, were passed down like you pass down a secret. From one great person to his disciple, to the next great person, very quietly, very privately, only to people of great stature that were able to understand and properly utilize these secrets. And that's how it continued from the giving of the Torah for thousands of years until the generation after the destruction of the Second Temple, our generation, the generation of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Because at that time, the Jewish people were so decimated. It was such a hard time that it was as if God said, I have to spill the beans. I have to tell you the deepest, deepest, deepest secrets because you need it to survive. That was our generation. So that was a different type of redemption on a spiritual level. And then we all came back now. Because again, we're old souls, we're powerful souls, and we're souls that know how to bring redemption. So therefore, since now is the time of the redemption, God brought us back again generationally so we can do it again. And specifically, we really are focusing on the women of the generation, that the women in Egypt were the ones that brought redemption. And we're told the women will be the ones that will bring redemption now. And again, as we're told by the Arizal, whose yahrzeit is coming up on Friday. Today is the 1st of Av. On the 5th of Av, Friday, is the yahrzeit of the Arizal, the second greatest Kabbalist of all times. And the Arizal is the one who teaches us everything I just told you, being the generation of the Tower of Babel, Babylonia, the generation that left Egypt, the generation of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, and the generation that creates redemption. So it's really nice in the week of the Arizal's passing, we actually learn something that he taught the world. Now, so what we're saying here is a very high level reason for someone to be reincarnated, because the world needs you. The Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, the author of the Tanya, came back because the world needed his energy. Rachel came back as David, the world needed her energy. We as a generation came back because the world needs us. We're the ones that create redemption. But of course, there also are other reasons why people come back that also involve things they need to work on for themselves, which of course is more what we were discussing here. So sometimes it's a combination. Sometimes the world needs you and you didn't do everything you were supposed to have done or could have done or needed to do. It doesn't necessarily mean you sinned and you did something wrong. There's a difference between doing something wrong and not doing everything that's possible to do. So sometimes the soul comes down, great souls, because the world needs you and because there's something you didn't do in a previous lifetime. So we can sort of say you need it because you were missing something, but primarily it's because the world needs you. I spoke before about Moses, that he was really, on one hand, a reincarnation of Noah and a reincarnation of Abel. And one of the reasons I was explained is why is Noah and Moses, why did they share the same soul? Because of exactly this point that I'm mentioning. Obviously, Noah was, as we say, a tzaddik, a completely perfect person. He continued mankind. From the entire generation, he was the most righteous person living. In his merit, mankind continued. And yet we're told there's something he didn't do. Maybe some of you know. Do you know what he didn't do? Holy, holy, holy. What didn't he do?
He didn't spread the word about one God, like Abraham, right?
Wow,
So
Chava. Check, check, plus. He didn't spread the word. She said it nicer. That's true, because she's comparing him to Abraham, to Avraham, who was out there going, I'm going to save the world and bring the world and connect the world to God. And Noah didn't do that. Noah was incredibly great. Incredibly. I'm not in any way trying to minimize his greatness. That would be a ridiculous thing to do. He was clearly the only person in his generation worthy of being saved. And in his generation and in his merit, man continued. So we're very grateful to his righteousness and perfection. But as Chava said, he didn't reach out to the rest of the world. He didn't proactively try to save the other people in his generation. Now, again, we're told he didn't try because he knew it was pointless, because he knew they weren't interested. And he actually spent, I don't know, like 100 years building this ark. I don't think it should take 100 years to give a lot of time for the world to say, what are you doing, Noah? What are you doing, Noah? And he had lots of opportunities to tell his story. Oh, he's posting his story, so to speak, as they did it in those days, word to mouth. Oh, God's going to destroy the world. It's going to be a massive flood. That's why I'm building this boat. So there was not really a thought that if he had worked harder, he would have saved more people. But still, he should have tried. And he didn't. And that is one of the reasons he came back as Moses, because that, of course, was Moses's forte. To not just personally be this holy, holy, holy person, but to bring all of the 3 million of the Jewish people with him. So that's just an example of this concept of very great people, no sins on record. It's not like Noah did something wrong at all. Why did he have to come back? Well, the world needed his energy. And there is something he didn't do that in his next lifetime he would accomplish. Another famous example of that is the Baal Shem Tov. I think I've told you this before, so maybe some of you remember that the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, the founder of what we call the Hasidic movement, he's one of the greatest Jews ever, and he was a hidden tzaddik, meaning the world didn't know his holiness. He was seemingly a very simple Jew. He didn't want anyone to know. He didn't want anyone to bother him, so to speak. He wanted to serve God. He was very poor. The only one that knew of his greatness was his wife. She came from a very illustrious family, and her brother couldn't understand why she's marrying this simple Jew, because even he was not at that time privy to the greatness of the Baal Shem Tov. He was being taught by Achia Hashiloni. Achia Hashiloni, who lived in Egypt, was part of the generation that left Egypt, lived through the desert, and lived for hundreds of years after. And he was a great prophet and leader of the Jewish people. And then he passed away. And he came down, this soul came down and would teach the Baal Shem Tov. And he was the one that told the Baal Shem Tov, okay, the time has come. You have to reveal yourself on your 36th birthday. You got to reveal yourself. And the Baal Shem was saying, no, I don't want to do that. And then Reb Adam Baal Shem, who was the human being, soul and body, who was the leader of the Jewish people at that time, he understood what was happening. He was not able to personally meet and see and speak to Rabbi Yisrael, the Baal Shem. So he wrote him a letter. He wrote him a long letter. He gave it to his son. He told his son, go to the Carpathian Mountains and leave the letter somewhere there. He'll find it. So his son, okay, he doesn't even know who he's going, where he's going. He goes to the Carpathian Mountains, where his father directed him. He literally just put down the letter, and it reached the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. In the letter, Reb Adam writes to Rabbi Yisrael, this is not your first lifetime. You've been here before. What was your previous lifetime? You were a simple Jew in Tzfat, a good Jew, a pure Jew, a holy Jew, very simple and very ignorant. And one day, middle of the night, there's a knock on your door, and the house is small, and the house is cold, and the children are hungry, and it's dark, and suddenly there's a knock in the middle of the night. I mean, people don't go visiting in the middle of the night in those days. Who's at the door? The door opens, and suddenly the house is full of light, because it was Elijah the prophet. Elijah the prophet came. And he said, I have come to teach you Torah. You did something so special on your bar mitzvah that from heaven I was sent down to teach you Torah. And this was so exciting because now the house is full of light and the house is full of warmth. And the children wake up, they forget they're hungry, they start dancing, and everyone's so excited. And then Elijah says to this man, this pure and simple ignorant man, tell me, what did you do on your bar mitzvah for which you merited that I should come and teach you Torah? And the man said, I can't tell you. I did it purely. I did it for God. I don't want to talk about it. And Elijah said, well, if you don't tell me, I'm going to leave. And the man said, I can't tell you. And Elijah left. And the house became cold and the house became dark and the children remembered they were hungry. And Elijah goes back up to heaven. And as he's above, there's such a ruckus going on. People are like, somebody refused to learn from Elijah the prophet? Wow, is he great. You really have to go back and teach him. And that's what happened. And this simple man learned with Elijah for the rest of his life, becoming so great in holiness, in purity, in Torah knowledge. And the rest of his life, he was a Jew that nobody knew anything about, was poor, simple, and from the greatest of the greats. And when he passed away in heaven, they said, wow, such a person, so pure, so holy, so knowledgeable, so righteous, but the world never benefited from your light. The world never benefited from your light because you were a secret Jew your entire life. Nobody knew your greatness, which means nobody benefited from your greatness. You have to go back down because this time the world has to benefit. And Reb Adam said to Reb Yisrael, that was you. You're in this world for this point that the world can benefit from your light. You have to reveal yourself. And he did. And on his 36th birthday, he revealed himself to the world as Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. How do you process this idea that a person who is so perfect and yet doesn't do everything? How does that make sense to you? How do you understand that? Anyone? Does it make sense to you? Does it seem strange to you? Does it seem logical to you?
It seems a little strange to me because if you do everything like God's want you to do, you would be with people, you would do something for people, and people would know you.
You're saying the whole concept of someone who is what we call in Hebrew a tzaddik nister. Tzaddik nister is the Hebrew term for someone who is completely righteous, completely godly, and he doesn't want the world to know. So you're saying that whole concept seems strange.
Yeah, because I thought that part of being tzaddik is doing something with people, for people, people would know you.
So you have a very good point, and most people do have an obligation, an imperative to share their light with others. But there are some people that don't. We're told actually in every generation there are 36 such people that are pure, holy, godly, and the world doesn't know about them at all. And that's their service. Like, no, their service is not, because when you interact with the world, sometimes it takes away from some of the time you could spend just interacting with God and connecting to God. And sometimes it could be a distraction almost. Now, again, aside, like when I think of let's say the Lubavitcher Rebbe spending hours standing and giving out dollars, like couldn't he be doing something more valuable with his time, studying, learning, writing more new Torah? No, he's a leader of the Jewish people. He's connecting on an individual basis to Jew after Jew and non-Jew as well, human after human after human. But there are some that actually this is their job. Their job is to just purely be devoted to God. But it is not what we think of as normative, as how we normally would view someone and why they're in this world. Any other thoughts on this?
On the other hand, I like this idea because that means nothing is wrong with being not with people, but being with
Yes, you could say it's the reason for my soul. My soul is supposed to just connect to God. I think sometimes we all have pieces of both. We all have pieces where we're really supposed to pray, study, learn, and not share with the world everything we're working on. And then we do have that piece where we're supposed to try to give. And everybody has a different composition of how much should they be outward bound and how much should they be inwardly working on themselves. Some people have a lot more outward, some people have a lot more inward, some people it's a balance. But yes, 100%. There's these souls and these souls, and we're all working for God. There's a reason for every single one. Anyone else? Any other thoughts on this? Okay, so we will continue next week to talk about the rest of us that come back. Other reasons for reincarnation, more reflecting maybe some lacks on our part and what happens, and some more of the, as I'll call it, technical details involved in the process of reincarnation.